Well, Jeff, this is the voice of Peter, and I don't know if the other guys introduced themselves already.
We did.
Great. Fantastic.
And then immediately started talking about Oreos to make our guests feel weird.
Right away, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. That's why I was late, so you guys could just get things awkward.
Yeah, right out of the gate.
Right out the gate.
Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your host, Sean Hartman, and as many of you know, I haven't always been the mild-mannered podcast host you know and love. In my younger days, I was a dock worker, until one day, an old lobster man pulled me aside and said, "Son, I can tell this life isn't for you. You're destined to inform a small but passionate group of music nerds about good records they can theoretically still find for $10 or less at their local record stores." I've never looked back.
Wow, the origin story.
Yeah.
That's roughly how I imagine you got into this.
Yep, that's how it happened.
It's nice to be confirmed, though. Well, I'm co-host Jeremy, and I got to tell you guys, I'm in a good mood today.
Oh yeah, that's rare.
I know. I got a new guitar.
Ooh.
Yeah. Some drunken fool just left it out on the street. It was just sitting there. Beautiful blonde Epiphone. So I just grabbed it and took it with me.
Uh-huh. So that's put you in a good mood.
Yeah.
And that refers to something that happens in the story of the artist we featured today?
Maybe.
Oh, great. As the person that put together the bio, I don't know what you're referring to, so it's a good start here. But I am co-host Peter Cook, and speaking of guitars, I've been playing guitar for almost 30 years, yet the only chord I know is the one that connects the guitar to the amp.
Ugh. I know that's not true, Peter.
Yeah, you've seen me play chords.
Yeah, dozens of them. Hundreds. Thousands.
Yeah. That was a Jad Fair quote from Half Japanese, Jeremy.
Oh, okay.
And that might relate to our guest today, who is an award-winning director, writer, and producer whose work includes documentaries such as Half Japanese, The Band That Would Be King, The Devil and Daniel Johnston, and author, The JT LeRoy Story. He has been a writer and producer for episodes of Mike Judge Presents Tales from the Tour Bus, including the pilot episode on Johnny Paycheck and the episodes on George Jones and Tammy Wynette that I definitely watched as research for our Tammy Wynette episode, and the whole series. He was also a writer on the biographical sports drama film Chuck about heavyweight boxer Chuck Wepner, the inspiration for the 1976 Rocky film, a subject he also covered in the documentary The Real Rocky for ESPN's 30 for 30 series. Welcome, Jeff Feuerzeig.
Hey guys, thanks. How you doing?
Doing great. I'm out of breath after reading a truncated version of your bio.
A lot to cover.
I've been busy.
You sure have. And we're very grateful to you for taking some time out to talk to us about an inexpensive, common, and underappreciated record. Would you like to introduce that record?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, you guys emailed me a very nice request to appear on your show. And then you sent me this elaborate, long list. First, I got really excited. I was like, oh, I got lots of underappreciated albums I could blab about. And then you sent me this list. I couldn't really get too excited about. It's not like there's some artists on the list that I like, but there was nothing on the list that really made me go, oh man, I need to talk about that album, or I have some expertise on it or something, because I just didn't. And then I offered up a couple suggestions, I think, which you rejected.
Yeah, we're very particular here.
Yeah. I offered up, the things I'm actually passionate about recently that I discovered that I guess are outside of your bargain bin dollar thing, which is a cool idea, your framing device. But anyway, I offered up the 39 clocks from Germany. Everybody should go out and just find the 39 clocks, because these guys weren't going to allow me to talk about it today.
Very cool band, though, and I was familiar with them. I felt all the more bad that I had to reject that one.
Yeah, and then I was going to, if we did the 39 Clocks podcast, I was going to turn people on to the After Project from the 39 Clocks co-leader, Jürgen Glue, and he has a band called The Phantom Pain, which is Payn, and I was going to turn people on to that. So who's ever listening could be jotting this down, you know? Those records are out there. Then I think what happened, and I'm double-checking. I actually have your list in front of me. I think you had a Loudon Wainwright III record listed as an artist, although I don't see it now on the list.
I think I took them off after you selected. We might have had both his third album and Attempted Mustache on there as options.
Right. So I got all excited, not by those two choices, because I wouldn't know a thing about those particular albums by this artist. But then I was like, that's a guy I can talk about, because his most underappreciated album, of course, is the one we're about to talk about, which is Loudon Wainwright III's second album, known as Album 2. Not the most creative title.
Yeah.
But that's the album I ended up, choosing, but you agreed to allow me to talk about, so here we are.
Exactly. And this came out on the Atlantic label in 1971, and the first song we were going to play was the second song on the album, Motel Blues. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Motel Blues, Side A, Track 2.
This town television shuts off at 2. What can a lonely rock and roller do? The bed's so big the sheets are clean. Your girlfriend said you were 19. The styrofoam ice bucket's full of ice. Come up to my motel room and treat me nice. I don't want to make no late night New York calls. I don't want to stare at those ugly grass mat walls. Chronologically, I know you're young, but when you kissed me in the club, you bit my tongue. I'll write a song for you and put it on my next LP. Come up to my motel room, sleep with me.
Until getting a copy of this album after you selected it, Jeff, until then, I have thought for years that was a Big Star song, because a cover of that appeared on the Big Star live album recorded at WLIR in New York in 1974. And so I knew Motel Blues as a Big Star song, and it seems like it could be an Alex Chilton thing, but no, it's a Loudon Wainwright III song.
Well, that's what happened to me. I'm a giant Big Star guy, and it's so interesting because I had this bootleg. I still have it. It's really a Chilton Big Star bootleg called Beale Street Breakdown. That would be very tough to find, but it's out there, and there was this song on there, Motel Blues, and it just cut me in half. It was a long time ago. And then, of course, it appeared on, like you just said, Big Star Live, which is one of the best Big Star releases, in my opinion, live on WLIR in Long Island. Love that album. Every song that's on all the other Big Star albums that appear live on this record, it's like Big Star, in my opinion, at its best. So I'm a massive Chilton guy, and as far as I was concerned, for like 2 decades, Chilton wrote that song, and every version that I've been able to track of him singing it, whether it was with Big Star or Chilton solo, it just cuts me in half every time. It's just one of the great songs. And then I guess it's probably thanks to Discogs, which I spent a lot of time on. I was like, Chilton didn't write that. That's really weird. And of course, being a child of the 70s, I'd heard of Loudon Wainwright III, but I have to admit, I never really listened to him. He was, kind of growing up, lumped in with a lot of other, what people would call the new Dylan, which is very unfair, actually, once I spent some time with Loudon Wainwright III's work. So anyway, I find really the first 3 Loudon Wainwright III albums. I immediately go to album 2, which of course has Motel Blues, and I'm dying to hear, is it possible that, like often happens, like Chilton, improved it perhaps? Because like in my mind, it's just a Chilton song. He made it his own, right? I put on Loudon Wainwright III's version, which is, of course, is from 1971. And like every molecule of greatness, all the nuance, all the emotion, the guitar, everything that Chilton replicated and covered is all there in the original. And in my mind, it's a tie. It's a perfect match. It's just perfection, what we just heard and your listeners just heard. So anyway, so that was my introduction to going back and trying to see like what's up with this Loudon Wainwright III, singer-songwriter, artist from early 70s. And I ended up, obviously listening to this whole album called Album 2, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. So after playing the second track, Motel Blues, I was like, okay, I gotta check this whole album out. And I just put it on in the car, which is where most of my good listening happens these days. And, he opens with Me and My Friend the Cat. That's when it really struck me. It's like this guy's voice, this high-pitched voice. It's not a beautiful voice, and that's fine by me. And I'm like, Jesus, out of all the singer-songwriters, and I love Dylan. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge Dylan guy. This is something different. I was like, man, he sounds so much like Daniel Johnston.
Yeah.
And I've never really heard anybody else sound like Daniel Johnston. We keep going through the record. Nice Jewish Girls. Be Careful, There's a Baby in the House. Suicide Song. Saw Your Name in the Paper. And then, of course, Samson and the Warden, which is the only piano song on the record. And not only is it Loudon Wainwright III's voice that's really striking me, it's the humor. This guy has got this rare sense of humor that's really coming through. And I'm not trying to say it's a comedy album. It's not. It's just great humor and phrasing and storytelling like early Daniel Johnston and the cassettes that I love so much. That's when it really struck me. I was like, wow, I bet Daniel, and I knew all about Daniel Johnston's antecedents and all his influences. Like he loved like David Bromberg. He loved a lot of singer-songwriters from the early 70s in Virginia. And it was just a theory of mine that he like literally had to have heard not just the other Loudon Wainwright III records, but this particular record, because this record stands out to me. I like it a lot more than Loudon Wainwright III's first album, which is a good album, solid. Matter of fact, I think when I did some research, this second album was recorded really during the same sessions, but there's just something more raw and all the songs are more humorous. And that's why we're sitting here talking about this record. This album is very, very special. And for the people, I did some Googling and I was reading all the old reviews. And honestly, it's largely been lost on most people about how truly great this album is. This might be his truly great album, and he's a good artist, don't get me wrong, but this album stands out. It's totally different. It's a left turn, and then he's back on the highway with the trip he's on. It's a good trip, but boy, this one is the one I want to be talking about, and if you could find it cheap, like you are promoting with your podcast, like in a bin anywhere, you want to get this record. This album's going to give you a very unique experience, not just some weird singer-songwriter album from the 70s. It's something else. It's special. And in my opinion, Daniel Johnston, when he was really young in high school, was playing the living shit out of this album. And then he wrote whole albums based on it. Songs of Pain, More Songs of Pain, The What of Whom, Respect, Retired Boxer, Don't Be Scared, or Don't Be Scarred. Depends how you pronounce it. Those are the Daniel Johnston albums that most people still overlook, unfortunately. But those are the ones they should be listening to, because those are the ones with the really humorous Loudon Wainwright III inspired songs that I love so much.
Yeah, I had never heard this album until you suggested it, and as soon as I put it on, you had just mentioned that you know, it had connections to Daniel Johnston, and as soon as I put it on and heard Me and My Friend the Cat, I thought, yeah, I'm hearing it. And yeah, this is a different Loudon than what I know from the third album, album 3, as well as Attempted Mustache. Those are those have full bands on more of the songs, and they're more polished songwriting. This one feels very personal, like he's just anything he's feeling, getting out or having to sort of exercise from himself is just going right into the songs.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, his humor is, like Daniel's, really sardonic, often really black, and I love that. And his voice is cracking all over the place. This is a really raw, like going for it, first take album, but recorded really well. And anybody who wants to go on that trip is going to be in for something. I mean, this is really the way that it hit you and me by surprise. I can't imagine anybody else not feeling the same way. This is an overlooked, fantastic album from 1971.
Agreed.
Meanwhile, the record label dumps him after this album. Yeah. Atlantic put out album 1 and album 2 sort of back to back. It sold, bupkis, and they dumped the guy, and that was that.
Yeah. Clive Davis then came along and took him over to Columbia, and that's when he started having mainstream success.
Somewhat.
Yeah. Relatively.
Not a household name, but yeah. He had a career. He absolutely had a career, and a good career, and he worked, and that's great. And he probably made like 30 albums, but man, this one is fell through the cracks.
Well, should we give them a little bit of that opening cut we've mentioned a couple times? Me and My Friend the Cat.
Totally, and you believe it. His friend is the cat in this moment in his life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is side A, track 1.
Me and my friend the cat. Into the night we sat. We were sitting at speeds known only to few. Incredible distance we traveled us to. If only you'd been there, you'd know what I mean. If only you'd been there, if only you'd seen. For the Ides of March were upon us then, and it's been a year since I didn't know when. Me and my friend the cat Well, we talked about this, about that. We were talking in circles. You would never have guessed that this was the target and that was the quest. If only you'd been there, you'd know what I mean. If only you'd been there, if only you'd seen. February's over and time marches on. Yesterday, yesteryear got up and gone.
As soon as I put this album on and heard that song, I also concocted a much less evidence-based theory of an artist who has to have been influenced by this guy.
Gordon Gano.
Well, yeah. But the thing that came to my mind all of a sudden was Blind Melon, Shannon Hoon.
Oh, yeah, I could hear that too.
Yeah, he's got that like similar way of singing with like a high scratchy voice. And there's one song in particular he made called Skinned that was about the serial killer Ed Gein.
That's on Soup.
Yeah.
Great song.
Like a silly, kind of goofy, but it's like dark. And I'm like, this is a straight line. This is where he took that from, was Loudon Wainwright III.
Yeah, that's not a bad theory. I don't have anything to prove.
No notes?
Yeah.
I've never heard Blind Melon, but I believe you. But I'll tell you, I've heard a lot of early Gordon Gano and the first two Femmes albums, Violent Femmes. That is exactly where he took his thing from. This is all from me and my friend the Cat. Even down to the religious chant in the middle there that Loudon Wainwright III does. I mean, that's just pure Gordon Gano.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, we just recently, you mentioned David Bromberg, and we just recently did his first album on the podcast. And yeah, kind of a similar ilk, these late 60s, early 70s idiosyncratic singer-songwriters that came in the wake of Dylan. And I think a lot of them influenced sort of the freak folk that would follow in the 80s and 90s and 2000s and beyond.
Well, that's so interesting you brought up Bromberg, because that was sort of what happened with Loudon Wainwright III, where I did some phone calling about to Daniel's old friends. And I knew Daniel loved Bromberg because he drew Bromberg. And there was one song, it's my favorite Bromberg song on the first album. It's called Sammy's Song. Mm-hmm. It's a masterpiece. According to my good friend Jeff Tartikoff, Daniel's former manager, there was, an idea where Daniel might have covered it, but he never did cover Sammy's Song in Bromberg. But then when I asked about Loudon Wainwright III, and I called Daniel's childhood best friend, David Thornberry, nobody could validate that Daniel spent time with Loudon Wainwright III, although they will validate that he was way into Bromberg. But I went through the whole Bromberg catalog, and I really dig Bromberg. What's cool about Sammy's Song is that Dylan plays uncredited harmonica on the track. Makes it even cooler.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, it's absolutely the best Bromberg song he ever wrote. He doesn't have a lot more songs like Sammy's Song, but Sammy's Song could be a Loudon Wainwright III song. That's what's so interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Having just recently talked about Bromberg and then getting into this album, there were moments that I was like, I have to separate these artists in my mind. Like, there's definitely some common threads between them. And yeah, down to I think this is coming out the same year that Bromberg's debut came out, or at least really close to it.
Oh, you're right. It is. You're right. It's 1971.
Yeah. Well, I put together a little bio on Loudon here. Would we like to get into that at this point?
Let's do it.
Sure.
Yeah, I only know his ex-wife and girlfriend thing.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Well, yeah, he's come up on our Roaches episode as well as our McGarrigle Sisters episode because he's tied right into that. But yeah, we'll address that as we go along here. So Loudon Snowden Wainwright III.
Father of Edward Snowden.
I know that name is forever associated now with that. He was born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina on September 5th, 1946, making him 1 year to the day younger than Al Stewart, also recently talked about on the podcast, and 1 year to the day older than Buddy Miles. Loudon grew up in Bedford, New York. That's in Westchester County. His father, Loudon Wainwright Jr., was a famous Life magazine columnist and editor, and his mother, Martha Taylor, was a yoga instructor. His father was not a professional musician, but did play piano and sing. He wrote some songs and also had an extensive record collection. So our Loudon here, the third, grew up hearing stuff like satirist Tom Lear, which makes a lot of sense, Frank Lesser, who wrote Tin Pan Alley and Broadway songs, Huddie Ledbetter, or Leadbelly, more commonly known, Joan Baez, and some jazz records. As Loudon started branching out on his own, discovering his own things, he found folk acts like the Kingston Trio and then Pete Seeger, and then got really deep into Ramblin' Jack Elliott, a student of Woody Guthrie. Like his father before him, Loudon III attended private school in northern Delaware at St. Andrew's School, which is where Dead Poets Society was filmed. He graduated in 1965, and he played some guitar while in school. He was inspired to purchase one after seeing a very early performance by Bob Dylan, and he would also go to see Ramblin' Jack Elliott perform at Second Fret, which is Philadelphia's premier folk club. It wasn't until later, when working a job in a boatyard in Rhode Island, that an old lobsterman named Edgar inspired him to pick up a friend's guitar and write his first song called Edgar. Having sold off his first guitar sometime earlier, he soon acquired another guitar and began writing prolifically. Now, none of this has to do with Jeremy's intro, he informed me.
Yeah, that's just about his song Reg Guitar, where I don't know if it's a real story or just a song he made, but he claims to have burned a guitar in the song, a Reg guitar. Then he buys a new guitar from a pawn shop, and some junkie steals it 3 days later. And then he's like, God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. And I know that song because that's on album 3, but I just did not, I didn't connect the dots when you said it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting because that song stood out for me on album 3 because he mentions Peter Townsend by name smashing the guitar, by the way.
Yeah.
And lighting it on fire. So I thought that was super cool because I'm a massive early Who fan.
Nice. And of course, as we've already addressed, the songs that Loudon writes, they're often described as humorous yet somber and nakedly honest autobiographical songs. It seems that a lot of them feel like stream of consciousness. Like that Me and My Friend the Cat, it almost feels like it could have been off the cuff.
It feels that way, but they're always like way too clever to have actually been that way.
Yeah, agreed.
It definitely seemed like critics and interviewers of the time didn't always know what to make of the humorous element of his music. I saw people ask him, like, are you even serious about your music? Like, is this all a joke to you kind of thing? Some people just didn't get it.
Which has to hurt. He seems like a real craftsman with his songs. And
yeah.
I mean, I feel anytime that you have something that can be interpreted as humor, you instantly get put into that parody or satire category, and it's like that can be a part of something without it being the whole.
Right.
That's a really good point you guys brought up because in all the old reviews, because I read them all to prepare for this chat, they all missed it, and that's because these critics are largely humorless, unfortunately. But people dig this unique humor that Loudon is serving up here, and even on the reissues, because these records were reissued eventually. They're still like putting it down. They were saying like a song on this album, for instance, Cook That Dinner, Dora, is like a nothing little song. But honestly, the whole thing flows beautifully. And Cook That Dinner, Dora fits in beautifully with the rest of the album with songs like Suicide Song or Nice Jewish Girls or Samson and the Warden that we're going to talk about shortly.
Yeah, that's something that's always clicked for me as the first song I heard by him. It's actually kind of similar to your guys' story, but it was the McGarrigles sisters version of the swimming song. And I was like, that song's brilliant. And then I was like, oh, that's not by them.
Yeah.
It's by Loudon Wainwright III. And I just love how he will tell a very literal story, and he won't spoon feed you the metaphor of it. It's just like, here's the story, figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, the next song that we were going to play in just a moment here, I'll talk about what that's about, which I never would have picked up on. But just a little more information on his story here. He began playing in Boston and New York City folk clubs, and while performing at the Gaslight in Greenwich Village, he came to the attention of Milton Kramer, who at that time ran the publishing company of Frank Lesser, one of Loudon's major influences, and Milt recognized that was there, and he became Loudon's manager and signed Loudon to Frank Music Publishing Company, securing a record deal with Atlantic. These first two albums were pretty much entirely solo albums. There's no backing band on them. Milton Kramer produced a few tracks on this album, but it's mostly Loudon doing production. And as Jeff mentioned, it sounds fantastic. Great production. It feels like he's right in the room with you when you get a good copy on good speakers. As we also mentioned, he had some good critical praise, but overall people didn't get these records. And he ended up moving over to Columbia. That's when album 3 hit. He had the surprise novelty hit, Dead Skunk, the Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road song on that third album. He also started taking on acting roles in the mid-1970s. He had a brief recurring role on MASH as Captain Calvin Spaulding, the singing surgeon. He appeared as the musical guest in season 1 of Saturday Night Live, the same night that ABBA also performed. That's an interesting combination.
Whoa.
He's appeared on several TV shows, including Ally McBeal, Parks and Recreation, and Undeclared, which that was a Judd Apatow show, and he's appeared in a number of Judd Apatow works, including 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up, the latter in which he also composed the music for that film, Knocked Up. He was also in Tim Burton's Big Fish and Martin Scorsese's The Aviator. So he had done some acting school previously. So kind of one of those people born to be on a stage. And yeah, he's released over 25 albums. Most recently, the album Lifetime Achievement in 2022. So that's very recent. It reflected on life during COVID. He has won a Grammy for Best Traditional Folk Album in 2010. That was the third time he had been nominated. He also, I watched a little bit of it. I didn't watch the whole thing, but he released a Netflix special in 2018 called Surviving Twin. And that was a live performance presented as a posthumous collaboration between him and his father, utilizing his father's writing. And he had this struggle with his own identity, with already having a famous father named Loudon Wainwright, finding his own path. So it seems to be about coming to terms with that.
I feel like you did all right on that front.
Yeah, he pushed hard enough, didn't he?
Yeah.
So I mentioned the next song that we were going to play had a meaning that I would have never gotten from just listening to the lyrics. I did some deep research, and by that I mean I read some YouTube comments. And
Nice.
the recording engineer on this album, Michael Leary, was commenting on the YouTube page for this next song, Saw Your Name in the Paper. He said that Loudon told him that this was written in memory of Janis Joplin, who would have just passed away right around the time they were recording this album.
Oh, wow.
So that was the next song that we were going to feature, Saw Your Name in the Paper, Side A, Track 6.
Saw your name in the paper, it was quite a blow. Your mother must be happy, they said you stole the show. You always did have talent, you always did work hard. I always knew you would prefer a place on the front yard. Maybe you'll get famous, maybe you'll get rich. It's alright, don't be afraid, lots of us got that itch. Lots of us really need it, we really need it bad. Lots of us are desperate, lots of us are sad. Take the money, take the love, take all the people give. The people all are dying and somehow you help them live. Oh, the people will destroy you, that love will turn to hate. But right now you must scratch it, your itch that's grown so great. Make yourself a hero, it's heroes people crave. Make yourself a master, but know you are a slave. Saw your name in the paper. Saw your name in the paper.
You know, I picked that song because, well, one thing, I had no idea it was about Janis Joplin. And honestly, if you saw it in a YouTube comment, I'm not convinced it is about Janis Joplin. The lyrics, to me, sound like he was young and read about some friend in school who got written up. He could have literally been on, the javelin team or something. And he just saw that this person, was unique and special and was somehow going to become famous. And then I think Loudon is expressing, jealousy and envy, yet admiration, knowing that that person is worthy. I think it's a pretty cool song, but I don't hear any Janis Joplin in that. I don't mean Janis Joplin's influence. I just don't hear the biography. It sounds like it's someone he knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and that this is the recording engineer, probably 40 plus years removed from the actual sessions, recalling that. So maybe it could have even been a different song. But also, I will just say, I couldn't find too many instances of Loudon really explaining his songs. I don't know if that's something that he enjoyed doing. I think he likes them being open to interpretation.
I think that's exactly right. Loudon has a really sardonic wit. So he's probably sitting there with this engineer, right? And the engineer's like, hey, what's the song about, man? And Loudon, of course, just says, oh, it's about Janis Joplin. Yeah. Deadpan, and then the guy believes it the rest of his life. But there's no way. Listen to the song. It's not about Janis Joplin. That's Loudon's sense of humor right there.
Yeah, I think we're cracking the code here a little bit right here on this episode.
Wait, listen, Loudon's probably going to listen to this, right? And you're going to get a phone call, and he's going to tell you one way or the other. That's what's going to happen. I predict it.
We will include that on a future installment of For the Record if we get that call. Loudon, you can email us at idbuythatpodcast@gmail.com if you want to set the record straight on that. So we've talked a lot about his story, but he has, of course, a lot of family who people are familiar with, and I was going to talk a little bit about his relationships with his various family. This album was released at the same time that he married Canadian folk musician Kate McGarrigle, who we've recently talked about on our Kate and Anna McGarrigle episode. And she does appear on one song on backing vocals along with Philadelphia folk musician Saul Browdy on harmonica on this album. It's not one that we're going to feature today, but that marriage would result in two children, two very famous children, Rufus and Martha Wainwright. They both went on to become professional musicians. Actually, Loudon's sister Sloan is also a professional musician. It runs in the family.
Like the Roaches song.
Exactly.
Runs in the family.
But Loudon and Kate's marriage was rocky. Loudon was promiscuous. At one point while Kate was pregnant, he ran off to Europe with performance artist Penny Arcade. And his relationship with Rufus and Martha, his children, definitely was strained for many years due to his behavior when they were growing up. When they did leave Mother Kate in Montreal to spend time with Father Loudon in New York, they would often speak in French so that he couldn't understand them. But from what I've read, they are on much better terms nowadays, and Loudon went to Montreal to be with the family when Kate was on her deathbed in 2010. He later had a relationship with Suzy Roach from the Roaches, and the two have a daughter together, Lucy, also a musician, no surprise. The couple remain on good terms despite no longer being together. His His second marriage to Rita Marie Kelly also ended in divorce, but the couple had one daughter, Lexi, who did not become a musician.
What?
Yeah, she's a teaching assistant. Since 2015, he has lived with Susan Morrison, an editor for The New Yorker, and that relationship will hit double digits next year, which he says is a first for him. So that's just a quick overview of some of those Wainwright extended family connections. We've discussed previously on other episodes as well. It's a folk dynasty.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and jump over to Sean and look for... Yes, you. It's that time.
Okay. That time.
You know the time.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's dinner time.
What are we eating? What's on the menu?
Dead skunk.
Okay.
No, I want recommended similar albums,
Recommended
Sean.
similar albums. Yeah, that's what I was going to do. I was going to go into that, actually. So you guys know folk is not my main genre. I imagine a lot of the aforementioned albums on the list that Jeff didn't want to do were probably my selections. So
All that your preferred four-letter word F genre is funk, not folk.
that's true. Yeah. So you guys can tell me how good I did with these similar recommendations. First up, the aforementioned Kate and Anna McGarrigle self-titled album from 1975 that we discussed previously.
Yeah, I mean, that's got their version of Swimming Song on it.
Great album. Next up, the first album from Jesse Colin Young of the Youngbloods, The Soul of a City Boy from 1964. Some very obvious Dylan parallels going on there, and a kind of an outlier in his catalog, but very worth picking up.
Yeah, I've got a few of his albums in my collection. Offhand, I don't even know the titles of them. I haven't spent a lot of time with them, but I've been intrigued by Jesse Colin Young.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy with a huge catalog of music. And last recommendation, someone we have also talked about and recommended several times before, but the great Ian Matthews and his solo album Tigers Will Survive from 1972.
Well, that's a different one than the one we talked about, or I think ones we've recommended by him.
Yeah, we usually recommend his Matthews Southern Comfort phase, but his solo records from that time are also excellent. A little more of a full band kind of folk rock style on there, but I think the mood of that album pairs really, really well with what Loudon is doing.
Yeah, and of course the David Bromberg album we covered recently.
With Skip
Yes.
Heller,
Yeah.
definitely. And of course, the Roaches. Can't mention them enough.
True.
And of course, all the Stress early Daniel Johnston cassettes that we started this off with.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you like Loudon and somehow, I mean, I guess after your documentary came out, Jeff, I started to think of Daniel Johnston as a household name. I feel like it took him into, from cult figure to someone that you could casually mention and people knew who you were talking about. I also feel like that elevated the music documentary, just as far as the expectation of how much of the person, how much documented of the person you would get out of a music documentary. I recently watched both the Karen Dalton documentary and the Judy Sill one, and I just couldn't help but see some parallels with what you had done with the Devil and Daniel Johnston.
Oh, nice. Thanks. Yeah, Daniel certainly was not, by any stretch of the imagination, a household name when I made that film. But, yeah, people now know who he is. But honestly, we live in a Wikipedia world. People know two songs. They know True Love Will Find You in the End, a masterpiece love song. And they know Some Things Last a Long Time, both songs featured in the movie. And they're great songs. Daniel didn't even write Some Things Last a Long Time. It's written by Jad Fair. But why we're talking about those early Daniel Johnston cassettes on your podcast about Loudon Wainwright III is that those early cassettes and all the songs that people probably have been too lazy to really check out, even though if they now discovered Daniel, there's a real deep dive there in in Songs of Pain, More Songs of Pain, the early Stress cassettes, which have all the humor that we're talking about and all the amazing turns of phrase and incredible piano playing, which is why we're about to talk about Samson and the Warden, which is the only piano song on album 2 by Loudon Wainwright III. This song really kicked my ass.
Before we get to that song and introducing it, did you have any upcoming projects you wanted to plug?
Well, I wish I could. I'm in the middle of another feature documentary right now. I'll be done probably end of November, December when we lock. But I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, but I'm excited about it. And there's one coming soon. I've been working on it for 2 years, but I'm just not allowed to talk about it yet. So I wish I could.
Well, we're very excited to see whatever you do next, Jeff. You've done so many interesting projects in the past, so we'll keep an eye out for things. But yeah, we'll go back to it. We'll talk about our final selection here, Samson and the Warden, that we were going to go out on.
Yeah, this song really killed me because, I get this record because of Chilton, as we discussed, and I'm tracking through it, and I'm hearing this high-pitched, reedy voice that's cracking and breaking, and it's all humorous and really interesting. And it's folk, but it's not New Dylan as it was labeled. And every song is just great. And then all of a sudden, the piano playing starts, and that was the big epiphany. It's Samson and the Warden, the only piano song on Loudon Wainwright III's album 2. It is a blueprint, a carbon copy blueprint of countless early Daniel Johnston songs, who, of course, played piano. It's the turns of phrase, and now this particular song is great because you have a villain who's the warden of the local jail. It's either fiction or Loudon spent some time locked up.
It's a true story. It was from 1968. He was arrested in Oklahoma on marijuana possession, and they were threatening to cut his hair while he and his friend were in jail there.
Ha! That makes it even better. That's exactly right. Because all the great early Daniel Johnston songs, the piano songs, are autobiographical. And all these crazy, preposterous things happened to Daniel, and he put them into songs, and that's what Loudon did here first. This is so cool. So he's locked up in the jail. It's the height of hippie culture. It's right around Summer of Love. And he has some people might think it's cliche, but it's not. Like, this is what it was. He's got the beard. He's got the ponytail. He's got the weed and the stems and the seeds. He's got the earring. He's got the beads. He's got the cowboy boots and the bell bottoms. I mean, he's got every signifier. And anyone listening as a listener should appreciate the great songwriting here, but the humor and the twists and the piano playing and the breaks and the warden as the villain. I was just smiling from ear to ear. This song is just so great. So, it might be actually the standout track of the record, but it really was. It sealed the deal for me, even more than me and my friend the Cat, for instance. This was exactly the track Daniel Johnston laser beamed in on, right up there with Dylan and the Beatles and Bromberg and early Springsteen, things that I know he was listening to. But this is something else, this track, so check it out.
Yeah, we'll get out of here on Samson and the Warden by Loudon Wainwright III. Thank you so much for listening to I'd Buy That for $1. And thank you again, Jeff Feuerzeig, for coming on and talking some wild connections that I don't know that any other guest talking about Loudon Wainwright III would have necessarily made. Very informed connections to Daniel Johnston, which is really cool.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So we'll get out of here on Samson and the Warden. My name is Peter Cook.
I'm Jeremy Ruggles.
I'm Sean Hartman.
And I'm Jeff Feuerzeig.
Once I got locked up in a dirty old jail, and the coffee was cold and the cornbread was stale, and I didn't cry. I tried to be brave till the warden tried to give me a haircut and a shave. Warden, you can hold me for a year in your jail, but don't shave off my beard, don't cut my ponytail. All you really found was some stems and some seeds. I'll give you my earring and I'll give you my beads. I don't mind wearing one of your prison suits. I'll give you my bell bottoms and my cowboy boots. Don't shave off my beard, don't cut off my hair. It took me 2 years to grow it and it just isn't fair.